here tells you what? Tells you that this world is neither good or bad. The physical world is neither good or bad. It's what you make of it. You can either turn this world bad for yourself, evil for yourself by doing all these evil deeds, or you can turn this world a world of happiness. And in the same sphere, Sayyid Khomeini, he brings a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And what does Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam say? He says, one who passes his evenings and mornings in such a way that the world is his biggest concern. That the world is his biggest concern. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he ordains poverty between his two eyes. If the biggest concern of an individual is all they care about is, where am I going to get fed from? If the biggest problem that this individual has, or the biggest concern that this individual has, is just worldly affairs, how to make more money, where's my money going to come from? If that is his biggest concern, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him poor. No. But if his biggest concern, and if he spends his days and evenings thinking about the afterlife, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure that this person is well-rounded, he's perfect. Perfect in the sense that the wajibat that they're supposed to do here, they do. And because they do those wajibat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them in this world. And because they have their eyes on not just 60 years, they have their eyes not just on 65 years, 70 years, the maximum lifespan of a human being. No, they have their eyes on something that is everlasting. Because they're looking at that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also give them in that world. This is why you shouldn't be tunnel visioned. Don't look at something and say, you know what, this is beneficial for me 2 minutes from now. This is beneficial for me 1 hour from now. No. How much benefit does it give you years from now? That's what you need to look at. A lot of people, they're getting an education, college, university. When they take classes, some of them, they don't look at how much that education is going to benefit them. What do they look at? Oh, these classes are easy for me right now. You know, these classes are easy for me right now. I'm just going to take these classes and whatever happens, happens. No, that means that you have no foresight. The only reason that you're taking certain classes is because they're easy. Take the classes because they're beneficial, that you'll be able to put them to use later on. If you and I are paying thousands of dollars for education, why would we squander, why would we waste those thousands of dollars? And this is why you see today, they talk about how there's a discrepancy between the pay of the men and the pay of the women. When they go into the details, they come to the conclusion that the type of courses that the females take, they're not as rigorous as the type of courses that the males take. If they're not as rigorous, there's going to be a discrepancy in the pay. But when they see about the pay between the people, the men and the women that have the same amount of courses, that are doing the same type of job, they say that it's insignificant. So when you go to school, pay attention, and not just that type of school. No, even when it comes to Islamic studies. If you look at the ulama, Sayyid Muhammad Tabatabai, if you look at his history, Sayyid Khomeini, if you look at his biography, they all say that we would sit in courses of instructors. We would sit in their courses. But if we feel like we're not learning anything, we leave. If we feel like we're not learning anything, we would leave. Because it's not beneficial. That is a waste of an hour. That's a waste of the amount of time that lecture takes if you're not learning anything. This is what needs to happen. When it comes to faith, you should be learning something about your faith. When it comes to akhlaq, you should be learning something. And not just learn, to be able to put it into practice. When they ask Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam about what knowledge is, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, he says what? He says it's ilm is knowledge, it's something that is given to you, but it's also put into practice by you. It's also put into practice, meaning you don't just keep it to yourself. You don't just keep it to yourself. You practice what you learn. That is called knowledge. According to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Well, then you might ask, well, what, like, for example, all these doctors, and I'm not looking at any specific doctors, but all these doctors, they say smoking is bad for the health, but they themselves smoke. They know, correct? Let's look at ulama. Let's look at ulama, because some doctors might be thinking I'm speaking to them. No, ulama. When it comes to some of the metaphysical, or when it comes to some of the spiritual diseases, they'll tell you from the member that it's bad, it's evil, it's all this, all. But you see that they themselves are engrossed in it. The same way that doctor, you can say that doctor does not truly have knowledge of what he's talking about, the same way that alim does not truly possess knowledge of what he is speaking about. Because if he truly had knowledge, he would put it into practice. If that doctor truly had knowledge, ma'rifah, if he truly had ma'rifah, he would put it into practice. And this is why, for example, these ulama, for example, Sayyid Khomeini in his Jahd Hadith, he wrote that book. Why? How? Because he put all of that into practice. Shahid Dastaghaib, he wrote his 40 great sins. Why? How? He put all of that into practice. This is what needs to happen. Not just come to the center, listen, and then go back home. No. Not just go to college, listen, and go back home. But put into practice what you've learned. And putting into practice does not necessarily mean just fiqhi masail that you put into practice. No. When it comes to aqaid, put that into practice. How do you put aqaid into practice? You have to remember, just like when it comes to fiqh, you can be at one level. When it comes to aqaid, you can be at one level. Increase your knowledge in aqaid, just the same way you increase your knowledge in fiqh. When we talk about tawheed, the way that we explain tawheed to children, and the way that we try to make them understand, should that be the same way that we explain tawheed to adults? Or no, should we expect that now that the adults, they've matured, their minds have matured, they should get a deeper meaning of tawheed? They should get a deeper meaning of tawheed. When it comes to risalat, a deeper meaning of risalat. When it comes to imamat, a deeper meaning of imamat. Not just stop and stick to God is one, Panjitan are 5, Imam are 12, Masum are 14. Masum are 14, well, what about 124,000 prophets? Are they not Masum? Do you see how our thinking changes as we get older? It changes when we get older. When we were young, we were taught what? Masum are 14, that is it. That's it. But then when we get older, we learn, hold on, what about all the other prophets? Now we can handle more information. Now we know that now we can handle the fact that there's a difference in isma. When it comes to isma, there's a difference. So then we can say, yes, the ismat of the 14 masumeen, it is at its highest and it's at the peak. When it comes to the ismat of all the other prophets, it's lower. We can start explaining these types of concepts. Why? Because now the mind has been opened. The mind only shuts when you shut it on yourself. When you shut it on yourself. And when you start shutting it on yourself, then this nur, ilm itself, Amir al-Mu'mineen itself, ilm, actual ilm, is nur from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's nur from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you start shutting it, it's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's shutting it. No, it's you who've shut the door on yourself. And what is one of the greatest ways that an individual shuts that door on themselves is to follow the desires of this world. Just to continue to follow the desires of this world. But are all desires bad? No, not all desires are bad. No. There are also good desires. And the ulama, they talk about it. And I know a lot of ulama, they say, no, all desires you should shun. No, not all desires you should shun. No, there are actually some good desires that you need to have. For example, the desire to want to worship. Is that a good desire or a bad desire? That's a good desire. Why would you want to shun that? It depends on how you're looking at it. Not all desires are bad. How do you put that desire into practice? That's what you need to look at. And when it comes to the world, you don't just completely shun the world. No, there's some things that you need to do in this world. Like, for example, wajibat. Wajibat as what? Like what? I'm not talking about namaz. No. I'm talking about wajibat for the world, for the sake of the world, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us working. Is that not wajib for a husband? Is not that wajib for a father? It's wajib. Those types of things, the ulama, they say you have to do. But those types of things are for what? The world. The world. It can also be, for example, they say, look, it can also be that you think that you're doing something for the afterlife, but it's not for the afterlife, it's actually for the world. You think you're doing it for the afterlife. And Sayyid Khomeini, he gives examples, like he says, for example, someone might be doing some sort of ibadat, and they think it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's actually for the world. And he says in his Jahl Hadith, he talks about, he doesn't say it's Sufi ways, but he was pointing towards that route. How some Sufis, they have some amaz that they do, there's some zikrs or some acts that they do. They claim that it is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for the afterlife. But no, it's not for the afterlife. It's just only and only for this world. Correct? And one thing that I want everyone to remember, because this is becoming a huge problem within Shia Islam now. All these manqabas that are coming, what do you notice? Please, someone. Compare them to the ones that were coming out 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Who said it? Music. Music. Now you see, if you watch the ones that were coming out 20, 25 years ago, there wouldn't be music in it. The ones that are coming now, they have music in it. They have music in it. What's happened? This is the way shaitan works. This is the way shaitan works. Something halal, a little bit of something haram. Now the majority of it is halal, but now that little bit of haram has now gone into it. Now what's everyone looking at? No, you know what? This is the zikr of the Ahlul Bayt. That's the zikr of the Ahlul Bayt. That's absolutely true. But the Holy Prophet himself, he said what? One of the things that I came here to do is destroy these types of musical instruments. Destroy these types of musical instruments. You just need the whispering of shaitan a little bit, that's it. If you take out the music from these, you see that the manqabat is absolutely fine. It's absolutely beautiful without it. So I just want everyone to pay attention. The same imams that forbade their followers from listening to music, now their followers are putting music with their names. Now their followers are putting music with their names. Well, example, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. He's walking by a house He sees that there's loud music coming from that house. Some narrations say it's the wife, some narrations say that it was the servant of the house. Whoever it was, they come out. Imam, he asked the person of this house, are they a slave or are they a free man? The lady, she says, no, he's a free man. Imam, he says, no, he truly is a free man, because if he was a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would not be doing this. He would not be doing this. Because this lady took a while to get back into the house, when she gets back into the house, the man, he asks, what took you so long? And she says, when I went out to go drop off the trash, I met this man. He seemed very holy. Now the man of the house, he's sitting up and he's listening. He goes, what did he say? He asked me, is the man of this house a slave or is the man of this house a free man? And what did you say? I told him that he's a free man. And what did he say? He said, yes, he truly is a free man. Because if he was a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would not be listening to music like this. That's when this man, he realizes who it was. He says, that's Musa Kazim. He runs out of his house without any slippers. Runs out of his house without any slippers. He catches up to Imam alayhi salam and he apologizes to Imam. And he tells him that I will never do this again. To this day, what is he known as? The Sufis, they go back to him. What is he known as? The person that left his house without any slippers. Who? You guys don't know? No, not Abdul Qadir. No. The person who left his house without slippers. He put the slippers on his shoulders and he ran. You all don't know. Inshallah, tomorrow, I'll tell you all tomorrow. But this is what I'm talking about. The Imams, they forbade their people, or they forbade the Shias from listening to music. Now the music is coming with their names. Tell me, how would the Imam feel? How would the Imam feel? How would Imam Ali alayhi salam feel that you're putting music with his name now? This is the world that Imam Ali alayhi salam told us to refrain from. This is the world. Why? What do I mean? By adding music, what's going to happen? Tell me, you guys all live in the same century I live in. You guys know about how the YouTube algorithms, you guys know about all that. What happens to it? The more views a video gets, the more? Thank you so much. That's it. By adding that little piece of music, that little bit of haram, now these people are getting paid. Is that money halal or haram? If they had just taken that out, every single penny of that would have been absolutely halal and there would be no shak about that. Now that they put that, at the very least, there's doubt, isn't there? They'll be held accountable for that. This is that dunya that the Imams have told us to be careful from. This dunya that causes you to disobey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the part of the dunya that tells you to obey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And when it comes to this world and why some people follow the desires of this world, if you look at the books of akhlaq, they say there are a few reasons for that. One is because there's some people that don't believe that there's an afterlife. They just believe that there's only and only this world. So do whatever you can in this world and that's it. So what do? Because they don't believe in an afterlife, all they do is follow the desires of this world. He says, no, now there's another group of people. And these group of people, no, they do believe in an afterlife. But why do they follow the desires of this world? This group of people, they take advantage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah. They take advantage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness, I should say. And I'm sure you all have heard those, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving. Don't worry, Allah will forgive. They commit a small sin, Allah will forgive. Another's, Allah will forgive. They say that, look, these types of people, they're just looking at that forgiveness and they're taking advantage of that. When Amir al-Mu'mineen, he said, you have to look at both aspects. You have to look at the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time, you have to look at what? The anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Each of them, what did they do? They correspond to the other. When you look at the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive, what are you actually doing? You're afraid of His wrath. You know that there's an afterlife, and you're afraid of His wrath, and you don't want to come under His wrath. And when people are fearing His wrath, what did they do? They end up asking for forgiveness. They end up asking. So the ulama, they said, another group of people, no, they believe in the afterlife. But the reason that they do, or the reason that they follow the world is why? Because they're taking advantage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, no, not mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. If you want to say mercy is forgiveness, they're taking advantage of it, no problem. But just remember that forgiveness is different, mercy is a bit different. They're taking advantage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. Now there's another group of people that followed, or they just keep their eyes onto the world. Why? It's because of other people. What do I mean? This is the world where this human being thinks the more money I have, the more successful I have become. Correct? This is the place where this human being thinks the more fame I have, the more successful I've become. This is the world where this human being thinks, for example, in the old times, maybe not today, maybe in some parts of the world, but the more children I have, the more successful I've become. They've taken some of these things that are just worldly and they've attached value to it. That value is not in and of itself. We will find out what the value of that is later on. What do I mean? If you've attached value to the number of children you have, if all your children end up becoming kafir later on, is there any value to that? No, there isn't. If you've attached value to just money, and all that money came from haram means, is there any value to that? No. If you've attached all your value to fame, and you've become famous for something that's haram, is there any value to that? Not in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that value is in the eyes of who? The people. And because that's in the eyes of the people, that's become valuable in your own eyes. You're doing it for the people. These are the reasons that say that people gravitate towards the world. And these are the things that the Imams, they say you should stop or refrain yourself from. And how do you do that? What does Sayyid Khomeini say? One of the ways to go about doing that. One of the first and foremost ways to go about doing that is remember that this world is a means. This world is not the end. The end is akhirah. The end is akhirah. This world is a means for that end. Whatever you do, constantly remind yourself that what I do in this world is what I will reap in the next world. That is one of the first things that they tell you to do. Constantly remind yourself of this. Why? So then you'll actually understand the value of this world. And then in your eyes, the value of this world in the sense of how it pulls you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you'll understand why Amir al-Mu'mineen says in his sermon that this world to me, this world of yours to me is what? It's like a pig bone in the hands of a leper. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen thought about this world that takes away people from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, he's not always putting down the world. No, he says, no, there are good qualities to this world too. Look at those good qualities. Because those are the ones that are going to take you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see the Imams, you see all of the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Look at all the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Which one of them valued the world more than the afterlife? Any one of them? No. To the point, the night of Ashur, they're all looking at their afterlife. They're all looking at Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You look at the ulama that actually became urafa, that actually left marks in this world. What did they do? Did they look at this world? No. Oh, just look at Sayyid Khomeini. He changed the world, but did he have an eye for the world? Was he doing it for the sake of the world? No, he wasn't. He was doing it for the sake of the afterlife. When you do something for the sake of the afterlife, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, He helps you in this world. When you do something for the sake of the afterlife, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, He helps you in this world. And this is why Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, I read that narration, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, where the Imam, he says that if someone spends the night and the day just worrying about this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them poor. But if they worry about the night and the day worrying about the afterlife, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enrich them. And if you look at what the Quran says about the world, I know I don't have much time, but when you look at what the Quran says and the narration or the verse of the Quran that I started this lecture off with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya qawmi innama hazil hayat dunya mata'un. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, oh people, that this life, this present life is what? It's nothing but temporary. It's temporary. This life is just a bridge for you to cross. That's it. Would you want to spend your whole life on this bridge? No, you wouldn't. You want to get to that other side. But that other side depends on what? How good or bad that other side is depends on what? Depends on me. Depends on me. If I want that other side to be beautiful, then my amal have to be beautiful. Then my amal have to be beautiful. And when it comes to these amal, the Quran itself, I'll give you an example. When it comes to Quran, the Quran, it says that on the day of judgment, there'll be a group of people, وَسِيقُ الَّذِي كَفَرُوا. There will be a group of people who will be pulled towards Jahannam. They'll be pulled towards Jahannam. Correct? We understand that. Why will they be dragged? Why will they be pulled towards Jahannam? No one wants to go to Jahannam willingly, correct? No one wants to go to Jahannam willingly. But then the very next verse, it says what? There will be a group of people that will be dragged to heaven. Why would they be dragged to heaven? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says heaven is for you, wouldn't you want to go? Wouldn't you want to go? The fact that you're being dragged tells you what? That you don't want to go. Why wouldn't someone not want to go to heaven? Why wouldn't they want to go to heaven? The only reason they wouldn't want to go to heaven is because why? If something more beautiful than heaven, something more better than heaven is in front of them. And when it came to the interpretation of this verse, for example, Atullah Bashir, he said that I myself read a narration in Bihar where the people that are getting dragged to heaven, they're being dragged into heaven. Why? Because these are the people that used to do Ya Hussein their whole life. Now they're seeing Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Now that they're seeing Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, heaven is completely empty. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say to the angels? He tells them, drag them to heaven. Everything that is happening now, they've basically stopped everything from happening. Drag them to heaven, or else my heaven is going to be empty. I want all these people to be in heaven. But those are for who? Those people who beautified their life in this world by doing the zikr or by remembering Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. It's for those people. Please, brothers and sisters, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the sins of all the mu'mineen, mu'minat that do not have anyone to ask for forgiveness on their behalf. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the sins of all the mu'mineen, mu'minat that are gathered here tonight. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. Let us, our families, be able to sacrifice our life for him and his cause. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And once again, please recite Surah Fatiha for your marhumin and for the marhumin of all of those people that provided for tonight's iftar, and anyone that gives their time to the center, gives their money to the center, gives whatever they can to the center. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all their marhumin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu as-samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفرهم وارحمهم واسكنهم بجوار محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, please. I think we have about 2-3 minutes for Maghrib.
No, almost done.
Oh, almost done. I thought it was. Okay.